Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started here for this UASEP webinar. Today, we are going to be hearing from Suzanne Mozdy in the SLCC math department. And she's going to talk a little bit about some of those lingering questions and thoughts that come up about, why is this higher ed sometimes seem to be resistant to Math 1010? And what are these math pathways and how do they work? So I'm going to turn some time over to Suzanne to talk a little bit about math pathways and maybe answer some questions that some of you may have regarding Math 1010 and sort of the role that higher ed sees in that course. So Suzanne, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. And then once Suzanne is done, we'll go ahead and take any questions that you may have. And then also just a note that this webinar will be recorded and posted if you'd like to reference it later for those who aren't able to attend today. So thank you very much, Suzanne, and I'll turn the time over to you.
Sorry, it says yesterday's date, when I was like preparing this.
Oh, a little extra preparation then, huh?
So I actually wanted to just start by giving you a little feedback, a little overview of what's happened since really the math completion initiative passed in fall in the 2015 legislation session. If you remember that in 2015, so basically, I'm just going to be excited for a little while, and then I can talk about other things. So in 2015, there was a law that passed that really incentivized everybody, both higher ed and public ed, to work on getting this QL completed for students in high school. And so what that meant for Salt Lake Community College really is those three courses that I have bolded, the 1030, 1040, and 1050. Those are the three courses that really are the ones that would help students complete their QL. Those are QL. And 1030, 1040, during this process, we removed the 1010 prerequisite. And then 1050 just has the secondary 1, 2, and 3 prerequisite plus placement through our placement process, which I'll talk a little bit later. But this set the stage for us kind of growing. And I think we did grow, and I'm trying to, there we go. Oh, there we go. And so let me see, I'm not doing this very well. There, yeah. This is not very good. Wait, let me stop sharing for a second and bring up my, that's not my PowerPoint. I brought up the wrong thing. This is why I stick with math. Oh, that's funny. Okay.
Well, it was it looked like a cool document.
It was a cool document. It was the document that came from the PowerPoint, but I don't think that the slides were in the right order when I was doing it. So I'll put them in the right order, and then I will send it out to you guys. But let me share again. So now that they're in the right order, I was just playing too much yesterday. Okay, let me share my screen again. So this is. Okay, so this is a pretty exciting slide for me. This slide. So once SB 196 was passed, the Utah System of Higher Ed put out a grant to enable all of the USHE schools to get some funding to help support the initiative. And so a lot of the four-year institutions with that money tried to work on programs that would create more qualified instructors. SLCC is not able to do that. We only are a 2-year program. So what we did was, instead of that, we tried this kind of failed instructor of record model for a little while. And I say that it kind of failed because there is just no way that we support so many instructors through the high schools that there was just, it really didn't do a good job. It didn't do what it needed to do, which was give a mentoring program. But what we have morphed it into during this final year of that grant is we've morphed it into a robust mentoring program, which I think has really kind of taken off. It's doing we're really getting our relationships a lot better. But also high schools are encouraging students to enroll in CE, and we eliminated the requirement for placement for both Math 1030 and Math 1040. So as you can see here, our enrollments for completion of credit hours really grew over the last few years and especially, you can see that jump before the bill went into law, or I guess it's supposed, I don't remember the term they use in the legal system, where you have to start enforcing that bill. So that happened in fall 2017. So you can see that big jump of what we did was actually making a difference, which I really was excited about. And then, so I think I was just out of order, so I'm just going to go. What we see here are the two courses that we push both at SLCC, and we would like to really make available first and foremost to the high schools, are Math 1030 and Math 1040. These don't have a prerequisite anymore of Math 1010, although there is some discussion system-wide to put the prerequisite of Math 1010 back on Math 1040, but it's part of a larger discussion about unifying Math 1040 across the system, which is a big conversation. But we only have the requirement of a C or better in secondary 1, 2, and 3. And these pass rates are incredibly high. So we really like our students. I mean, the goal of SB 196, the goal of the Math Completion Initiative was to complete QL. And this allows students to complete QL in one shot. And when we did this locally at SLCC, removed the 1010 prerequisite on Math 1030 and Math 1040, we saw our QL completion rates just at our own institution rise. And that was awesome. And hopefully you're seeing the same thing at the high schools. I know that our graph is better. So that's the graph. So this is completion. So it clearly shows that we're doing some good. The other thing I wanted to talk about is that this spring, so just last month, we finally moved from a surveying tool to Canvas for our placement process. And so what happened was so the background of this is that during, I don't know, probably about 6 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe, it's hard to say because the pandemic warped time. We were given the charge to do a couple of things by our cabinet. And the first one was to include multiple measures into our placement process, which may not affect a high school student as much, but it definitely affects our college students, because one of the biggest measures of success in a college level class, especially the first college level class, is the high school GPA. So we wanted to take that into consideration. And it also is length of time since your last math class is a huge thing about whether or not you're going to be successful or not in your next math class. Again, those two things probably don't affect the high school student as much, but they definitely affect our resident students. We had completed this a year ago, but it just got through our system in spring, so last February. So you're probably starting to see this new placement test for Math 1050. One of the things that I really like about it is it has algorithmically generated problems. The last one was in a surveying tool that we had to cut and paste, getting JPEG images of math equations because the program had no math symbols. It was awful. It was for the research, it was for the study that they wanted to have it through this surveying tool, but it was never intended to be that way forever, and it somehow got that way for the last 5 years. Anyway, we finally moved it to a place that actually can do math and can check math and can do algorithmically generated questions. We've made a couple changes in our student learning outcomes through our STEM pathway. And so this new placement test really matches our 1050 curriculum. And so we're pretty excited about it finally going live and to be able to look at it and test it. Just as an aside, I know there's one high school out there that had some issues with about, I don't know, 10 or 12 students being kicked out. So we're going to record what they're doing in there so I can look at how they're moving through the process, because we do want to make it a smooth process. But anyway, our pass rates for Math 1050 are staying steady, which is what we like, and we're hoping to see a rise in that as soon as we can get this placement test back in its process. So I'm going to stop there and ask if there's any questions about what I've just said so far. Wow, okay. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about, see, I had to talk about happy things. And now I'm going to talk about what Brandon had asked me to talk about like 7 months ago when he asked me to do this. And I can't believe that I remembered and could look back on, oops, I didn't want to do that. I'm going to share my screen again.
I do have one question.
Okay, sure.
So when you talk about this new program through Canvas and all of that, is that you're just talking about Salt Lake Community College, right? So if my partner is Weber State, that doesn't mean that's what they're using.
Right, they're not.
Okay.
However, we have talked system-wide on using multiple measures. So if they're not using multiple measures, it'll probably be integrated in eventually, because all of the data around placement, math placement especially, is supports the idea of multiple measures, because a placement test is high stakes for what's happening, but students don't understand the stakes that they're actually going through, because they don't understand the data that if they're placed too low, statistically speaking, they might not ever get a college degree. And so placement is very important to us, and getting the right placement is very important to us. And so
so currently, if they're using the ACE, you can qualify for Math 1050 3 ways. Either you take 1010 and pass it, or you have a 23 on your ACT, or you can take the AccuPlacer. Those are their 3 ways they can get in. So that's not necessarily changing.
No, and in fact, all 3 of those ways are still eligible ways for anybody to get into SLCC Math 1050. It's just that instead of offering them the AccuPlacer at SLCC, we offer our homegrown placement test, because we found that AccuPlacer does not accurately place students in placement in Math 1050. And when we did this research, it again may not affect high school students, but when we did this research, our student body is very different than the 4-year institutions around the state. And so we typically had students who scored at the same AccuPlacer level not do quite as well in the classes, and it has to do with a lot of confounding variables. But for that reason, we were messing around with the placement cut scores, and really just found that the best thing to do was to write our own. I saw was there something in the chat?
Yeah, there was a question that came in from the chat from Connie. It's SLCC specific, but it may apply to others out there. Other UC institutions may sort of approach things the same way. If you want to read that and
This
respond.
may not be exactly what you said. Oh, so the reason we didn't accept the P for placement was that P also, we actually did accept, I think we did accept the P for credit for 1030 or 1040. It was using a P for a prerequisite that we didn't accept, because C minuses and Ds were also considered P grades. And those could not, we didn't know what that P stood for. I can really speak English. We didn't know what that P stood for, so it was difficult for us to accept that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. This is Connie. So that makes sense. My only thing was I had multiple students who ended up getting a P during, say, secondary math 2 or secondary math 1 during the pandemic when they took those classes, and when they've gone to apply to go into math 1030 or math 1040, they have been denied. And they've had to go take the placement test or use their ACT score test to do so. And so that's why I was just kind of wondering if there was a rationale, if it was just that
yeah,
know what the P really would mean. And I understand that totally. I just thought, there's something else that I should be telling parents or students when they ask that. I just wanted to know.
Yeah, it's because, and you are using that P for secondary 1, 2, and 3 as a prerequisite. We don't know what that P actually means. And that's why we were asking for a secondary placement.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Suzanne, can I add to that?
Yes.
That was actually a ruling that we got from USBE. They said that they actually wrote it in there saying that a P grade does not qualify for as a prerequisite. So.
Well, I was going to say that I don't remember making that ruling, but I remember stating that for our own, that was what we did here locally, because we also gave P grades during the pandemic. So they were, unfortunately, they were not very useful. And so we advised students that if they were going to get a C or higher, that they should just take the grade. So, and I think that that's typically what students did. And so I think maybe the P really did designate as C minus or lower, but I'm not certain. I could be wrong. Are there any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to go back to sharing my screen and then just talk briefly. And Brandon may have to chime in, because he and Sid were working on a lot of data, and we are having a big symposium here, and I wasn't able to work on this much today. But I wanted to give you, so come on, there we go. I wanted to give you some backgrounds to the modifications of our offerings. In April 2013, we all got together, and when I say we all got together, no, I guess this is 2013 is when 2010 is when we adopted the Utah Common Core standard. I was actually on the task force chosen by the governor. There were 3 math department chairs around the state, and I was chosen to go through the Utah Common Core and kind of evaluate it for pretty much efficacy of learning mathematics and being prepared for college math. And it really, it's really an excellent standard. And if students come out of secondary 3, they should be able to go right into calculus if they understand, all of the student learning outcomes, if they really, really understand. So I was pretty thrilled. I know I was probably the only one who was thrilled because I knew it was really, really a difficult time for educators, and especially math educators and legislators during this time, because a lot of people were pushing back. But the standards and how they were written were very good, and I really, I respected the people who worked on this and chose the type of standard that Utah went with the Common Core. But what happened was that that made Math 1010 completely remedial, and so this is I did this work in 2015, I think 2016, where I have a spreadsheet that maps our Math 1010 objectives with the Utah Common Core, and it has where it's located. And actually, I took the time to mention the actual student learning outcome, but this is kind of how it breaks down. Yeah, even one of our objectives in Math 1010 maps to first grade level, and then we have 5th, 6th, 8th, and then this is secondary 1, 2, and 3. So there was no Math 1010 objective that was beyond the curriculum of secondary 3. And so it is completely consumed by the Utah Common Core. And it makes sense because half of the USHE schools consider it a developmental math class. At Salt Lake Community College, we consider it, we put it in the college level bracket, but it doesn't get college level credit. And the way we designate that is that QL. So quantitative literacy is what we consider college level mathematics, and Math 1010 has a QS level, and that is not a two-year equivalency of college mathematics. So we have this course specifically for preparation now for Math 1050, and for our students. And for your students, it's secondary 1, 2, and 3. And that's the way we see this. The reason why it is still considered a math class and not developmental math class is because we do offer AAS degrees or certificates that require a QS level math class, but it's kind of becoming obsolete, Math 1010, for use of that, because most of the programs are actually creating their own math classes to satisfy their own QS. So that's where that is. And then I think the only other thing was I showed the Math 1030. Did I show the Math 1030 pass rates? Yes. We have a pretty high math pass rates for 1030, 1040, and then this one is 1050, which is also pretty good. And the final thing, this one really frustrates me, and this is also one of the reasons why we keep it out of concurrent enrollment, because it's really, I don't know, it's a difficult class, and it shouldn't be a difficult class because it should be the class that it's a high school level class. But for some reason, the students that go through there, we're still what I call the pathway rut. Students still think that they need to go through this pathway. They need to take this class to get to their QL, and they don't. And so this is why we are minimizing the focus on Math 1010 and maximizing the focus on Math 1030, Math 1040, so students can complete their QL. And that's pretty much all I had to say about that. And so now I'll stop sharing and ask if there are any other questions we have.
Looks like a question came in through the chat. I think it's, is that Rob Scott?
Yeah, so yeah, it should be, yeah, it's, so are you having difficulty with, have you tried the new placement exam?
Yes, so we've had basically the same situations. Even though they've taken math 1, 2, and 3, they're still not able to qualify for 1050. So we have no way to qualify them for 1050 because the math test, they can't seem to pass the math test either. So what route do those students take without 1010?
Well, I guess I would probably put that back to the high schools. I mean, if they're going through the curriculum that is supposed to prepare them for 1050, really prepare them for college, calculus, and they're not testing into 1050, then I would probably look at maybe some of your assessments. I don't, I mean, I'm sure you do external reviews on your courses. I mean, we're going through our external review on our program right now, and I'm sure that that's something that is done. But
there's ideal and there's reality. And the reality is we have many students that still pass those classes, but do not qualify for 1050. So what do we do with those students?
I would recommend that they take 1030. I mean, if the goal is to complete their QL, then they should take 1030 or 1040.
Well, depending on, but 1030 doesn't qualify for them to take 1050.
Well, if the goal is for them to complete their QL, which is the goal of the initiative, then they've completed their QL with 1030. And 1030 satisfies the scholarship awards. It satisfies everything that they need in order to complete high school and be eligible for scholarships.
I'll ask a follow-up
What if a
question.
student wants to? What if a student wants to go into a class that's going to require calculus, but they can't place in 1050 naturally?
Yeah.
Well,
I'm thinking that there's a place for 1010 because at UVU we accept all students, and sometimes they need to have 1010 just to refresh what they should have learned in college.
So that's fine, and we are happy to give you our 1010 curriculum, and you're welcome to teach it, but we won't offer it concurrently because it doesn't satisfy. As all of the USHE institutions, we agreed that it is clearly remedial. It is clearly, and we all agreed to stop offering it through concurrent enrollment. And then there were people who were pressured, I guess other institutions were pressured and started offering it again. We are pressured, but we won't be offering it again because it is not, it's not in our purview. It's not in our mission to do this. Our mission is to have students complete QL. And if they're not eligible for 1050, then they can complete QL through 1030 or 1040. And you're welcome to teach that class as a pre-college math class, for a half a semester or for a semester, and then have them try and place into 1050.
I know one of the things that we've recommended in the past is because Suzanne, you've made available the Math 1010 curriculum, and that curriculum could be taught during a college prep math class. And even though they wouldn't get the credit, which the credit really wouldn't help them because, I mean, it ends up being elective credit that doesn't count towards anything. But they could take the class, which would be a refresher on the Math 1010 curriculum, and then later they could retake the placement test, and theoretically at that point they should place in. One of the questions I have is, so I was looking at that state data that Sid had sent this morning, sort of processing through that, and I noticed, let me just pull up really quick here. So it was, I think it was about 49% were completing their QL through Math 50. And then it was, I think it was like 12% 1030 and 7% were doing it through Math 1040. Well, 10% because you got to count Stat 1040, which I think is USU's class. If I remember right, I mean, and you can clarify this, so each of those courses, is when we talk about math pathways, I mean, 1030 is sort of like, I don't know what I want to study. I'm not certain what I want to go into major wise, or I'm going into an art field or humanities or whatever. But the majority would be the appropriate class. And then 1040 is like more health sciences and I can't remember the others. And then Math 1050 is STEM and then business, I believe. And from what I remember, I seem to remember you all saying that there are more students that think they're going into STEM or business that end up in the other fields than are in art or social sciences or whatever, and then they shift over to STEM. So really the 1030, 1040 is the better option for most students, because most high school students don't know for certain at that point what major they're going into. I don't know, do you want to speak a little bit to that, Suzanne?
I actually have another meeting that I'm supposed to be at right now. Because was this longer than 30 minutes?
No, 30 minutes. It goes 30 minutes.
Yeah.
If it goes over.
So
then...
I will speak on that soon. Yes, there's a lot of pass back and forth, but it seems like there's as many people who think that they're STEM that go to non-STEM, and the people who are non-STEM go to STEM. So it's not like people are running away from STEM. It's just that there's a lot of change. But one of the things that I really think that happens is it's a maturity level thing, not a maturity level. I am mature because I am, a senior in high school, but a mathematical maturity thing. So I think just a semester of additional mathematics is what students probably need in order to be able to think the way they need to think for a college level class. And that I believe is, a good way to approach a college prep class. But I really have to go. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, thank you, Suzanne. And we
Okay.
can hang on the line here. And I mean, Sid's on the line. I'm on the line. We can take any additional questions and do our best to answer any questions you may have about Math 1010 and math pathways. And yeah, so why don't we, we'll go ahead and take any other questions you have. Go ahead, Jill.
I'm not a math person or a counselor, so I'm just trying to make sure I understand when people come to me looking at, the potpourri of pathways. So you're saying that 1030 is more of a humanities pathway, 1040, can you say that again, is more what, social sciences?
Yeah, let me pull up. So there's a sheet that we had created, and I'll go ahead and pull this up and share it with you. So,
thank you. I was trying to Google it and I couldn't find it.
yeah.
I know you've shown us this. Okay, great.
Here on our website, under our high school partners section. And then we've got on the left-hand side, CE coordinator resources. And then down here under the handouts is our math pathways document, which I think I just recently updated. So you've got the artistic, general studies, humanities, arts, communication. Like if they're in that field, if they know for certain they're going to do humanities, arts, communication, or if they don't know for certain what they want to do, 1030 is the class for them. And then when we look at 1040, that's more the social and the health sciences. And then 1050 route is science, technology, engineering, math, business. And one of the things that Suzanne had mentioned before is, if a student is sort of uncertain, really they should be going this path. But I think there's a lot of students out there that maybe think they might be interested in that, but they might not qualify right into 1050. 1030 is still a really good class because it's a sort of more of a practical application of here's how, sort of a general overview of mathematics. Here's how math works in real, like everyday life. And it could be that in the process of taking that class, they learn and they understand like from a broader perspective, mathematics, and they might decide in the end, like, wow, really math, the STEM route and the business route really isn't for me. Like I'm much more interested in sort of this field, and this is much more applicable. So, and it fulfills the QL. They are done with QL and they've been strengthened. So this broad understanding of mathematics is going to help them if they decide, I really do think STEM, engineering, business, like that's the thing for me. They have a really solid foundation now with Math 1030 to hopefully be able to understand and grasp Math 1010 and 1050 significantly more as they move over. And once they transition to college and then jump into this pathway of moving on to calculus, that Math 1030 is going to give them a very solid foundation to help them to be successful. So I think it's a really good route for a student who can't place into 1050, but thinks they might end up in a STEM or a technology field or business. Because a high school, they think they might, but the reality is once they graduate from high school and then sort of explore around a little bit, they may end up in a totally different field. There are a few students who know for absolute certain where they're going to end up, but I think those are the minority over the majority. Go ahead, Sid.
You might add that if you're going to transfer to the University of Utah after Salt Lake or some other institution, where they have that QA and that QB requirement, because my alma mater is a unique institution. QA is 1030 and QB is 1040 or vice versa. So both those courses are recognized. You're going to become a BFW, a BFA, or going to fields like Brandon said, that are humanities. It would be nice for the next generation to know how to calculate a car payment with interest. And that's what 1030 does. Very applied.
And my other question is, well, Sid's still here. I'm wondering that USHE used to have some good data on math continuation, and I can't find it anymore. Is it still there, or did that have to be taken down, Sid?
You have to look at utahce.org. There's lots of stuff there, including the same things that the placement and the parent advising sheets. But we've done a couple studies that have looked at students who take a concurrent math and then a subsequent class on campus. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes, exactly. Like correlation to success for enrollment and continuation for a degree.
I want to say the last time we did that was 2018-19. And what it showed was no significant difference between a student who starts his or her math pathway in concurrent enrollment or one that takes the entire pathway on a college campus. Of course, few considerations. The only thing we can look at is students who are going beyond 30 and 40 to a calculus field. So maybe they took 1010 or 1010 and 1050 as a high school student, and then they're going on to 1210, 1220 calculus. And the other consideration is, we all know, in concurrent enrollment, we're not dealing with the entire pool of students. We're dealing with the motivated and engaged students who want to earn college credit while they're in high school. So those two considerations have to be taken into account.
Okay, any other questions? And I'll do my best to answer them, and Sid can pipe in. I know another point that's been brought up to me before is just to speak to sort of what Rob was talking about. We have these students that will take, they'll attempt to place into 1050 and they won't be able to place into it. And I know there's one principal that said, because we'd mentioned, you can use our 1010 curriculum, teach that high school college prep class using our curriculum, they can retest at the end. And they'd mentioned that the credit is sort of the driver. Like without the credit tied to the course, that sometimes the students are just not motivated to take it because they don't get college credit out of it. And our response to that was just sort of what we'd mentioned before, that the college credit, like even though they would get college credit, this is credit that doesn't really help them towards anything other than it's an easier way to transition into Math 1050 because they don't have to go take an additional test. But the placement testing process, now at least at Salt Lake Community College, is pretty easy through the old SLCC placement. The new test has got some bugs in it, but it's a fairly simple, straightforward test that doesn't take too long. And if they've learned everything in the Math 1010 curriculum taught through a college prep math class, or they've learned it in secondary math 1, 2, and 3, they should be able to breeze through that without a problem. And like I said, I mean, if they didn't breeze through it without a problem through secondary math 1, 2, and 3, that 1010 refresher would help them to breeze through it. And it's just I mean, they can now with the Canvas placement, they can just take it right there in the high school. I mean, they could probably integrate that into the actual class at the very end. So anyway, those are some solutions to get past it. But really, I mean, from Salt Lake Community College perspective, there's just the 1010 credit doesn't really help a student other than serving as a prerequisite. And there are other ways that we could meet that prerequisite without burdening the student with credit that doesn't count towards anything other than it adds credit that eliminates over time federal financial aid eligibility, because federal financial aid will pay for 150% of the credits required to get a degree. So every credit that doesn't count towards anything counts towards those 150 credits. So the more more credit that doesn't really count is eventually going to pile up and hurt a student. So other comments or questions? Go ahead, Sid.
And then ask a question of a comment and a question of the LEAs on the phone call. We understand that we're expecting that high school students who, quite frankly, you guys have much younger brain cells than me, are going to remember what they learned over a 3-year period of time in secondary 1, 2, and 3. And, the stuff in the first year might be a little bit fuzzy. I get that. But really, how many students are we talking about? How many students who got a C or better in secondary 1, 2, and 3 who want to take 1050 or not placing? Is it 90% or is it 10 for 15%? Does anyone have an idea? Dead silence.
Silence.
So if we had 100 students here at Skyline, and we have some pretty intelligent students here,
Yep.
I'd say 15% couldn't pass the test, couldn't qualify for 1050.
Did they come close or are they like way out?
Some are close, some are not as close.
Way out, yeah. So even though I'm 64, my friend, my 21-year-old, his brain cells are just, sometimes he knows how to turn them off and on. It's just amazing. So I think we should be looking at those things and seeing the effect. We can't be all things to all students. But if that number is more than 15%, then maybe we should talk. Especially when Salt Lake's got they're gonna want to hear from you when they have a new way to place students in this class. They want to hear if there's a change from what you've experienced up to this point with regard to the students who don't place. And it's not a conclusion, it's just an observation. Thank you.
And Connie also added a comment. She said at West, they've experienced about the same. It's about 20%. I guess a question maybe I have for Connie, Rob, anybody else who wants to pipe in is, of those 100 students, are those students that are certain that they are going into a STEM field or business?
This is where it gets kind of tricky for those of us at West High, Brandon.
Okay.
Because a lot of our students that are in this boat or situation are trying to go into our IB program, the International Baccalaureate program.
Mm-hmm.
So they are looking at going into STEM, but not necessarily here in the States. They also, a lot of them are thinking about going abroad. And so they're very concerned, and I have parents that are very concerned that their child goes to take this math, evaluation, this math test, placement test, and that they're not placing high enough to go into 1050 and feeling like, well, I don't understand. Why is my child not ready for this? What? And when I tried to explain that, well, perhaps maybe if they take 1030 and kind of get adjusted a little bit, review concepts, everything, then they will be more able to pass the test, or better able to pass that test to take 1050, say in the spring semester. And I'm getting some pushback from parents on that. And so that's why I'm just like, so there's two of them I know this year that they took 10-10 on a slick campus because that's what their parents pushed them to do, even though I wasn't sure that was the right solution for them. So I just want to make sure that I'm able to adequately present information to parents, students, etc., about the best course of action for their students based on what their students' ultimate goal or desire is at this time.
That's great. So maybe one thing that, I mean, we can do both at Salt Lake Community College and maybe within higher ed is find ways to speak to parents about these things, because it sounds like parental drive, especially around most issues in high school and concurrent enrollment is pretty strong, but in math, maybe there's a way that we can potentially influence parents to sort of follow the guidance that you're giving them instead of pushing back against what they feel is the higher course.
Yeah, I agree. I think that when I do my parent meetings and things, if I could have someone at SLCC talk to that aspect, that might also be helpful. So.
Okay, that's great.
I don't know. As a former helicopter parent of an IB graduate from RETS, I don't know if you can get through to those parents, young lady. You couldn't get through to me when Dina was at West. So,
I actually would agree with that. We can only try.
No, I agree on the explanation we call. If nothing else, you know, you've taken something over 3 years and it's totally legit. If you're a little bit rusty on some of the concepts, they're going to prep you for 1050. Because remembering something for 36 months during COVID, with all the social media that engages your attention, that could be tough. It could be tough for a college student. But there's got to be a way to debunk and demystify that parent concern.
Rob, can I ask you the same question? Are you experiencing something similar to Connie? Are most of those students certain that they're going into STEM or a business field?
Don't know for sure. I mean, we talked to them about that. I don't want to have to tell a student that, sorry, you can't go into a STEM field because you can't test into math 1050. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And so we say, well, your score isn't good enough right now. But again, the hard part is while in high school, there's nothing I can do to help them qualify for 1050. We don't have a class. And so if they can't, then they just have to wait till they get to college and then take 1010. And so that's why it's a little frustrating for the students and for us as we help students that we're not being allowed to offer 1010. It sounds like 1010 now is relegated to remedial rather than required.
I have a slightly different take than Suzanne, although she's the mathematician, and so I'm the peon here. But other institutions offer 1010, and Skyview is in Southern Utah State's footprint, right?
Skyline.
Am I right? Skyline. Oh,
Skyline.
no, never mind. Skyline's in your footprint.
Mm-hmm.
But there's going to have to be some way to demystify this for folks. And the statistic that Suzanne couldn't find, there was a study done by Utah State University, Noelle Cockett, when she was provost. What she concluded was that 60% more students who show up on their campus declaring a STEM field transfer out than transfer in. So you don't know what you're going to be when you grow up, when you're 16, 18, quite frankly, or 64. But you kind of have a sense that you're going to go STEM, not STEM, okay? And my other snarty comment to parents, and it is really snotty, is your child changes majors, they're going to have to do a lot more than take another math class, most likely, you know. And we don't want to compromise a student's ability in high school to try and dream and envision what he or she's going to become as an adult. So I'm going to hang up because my earbuds are about to die, but I appreciated this listening in on Brandon's meeting. And when the CE directors get together, we'll talk about this among ourselves and see if there's something we can a parent-facing message that we can ask the math chairs to help us work on, that doesn't belittle anyone, demean one type of math QL course over another. And thank you very much, Brandon. I'll talk to you soon.
You bet. And one thought that I had is just kind of going along with what Rob said, is potentially maybe we redesign this document here so that it doesn't seem like 1030 is the end, but so that parents could potentially see that if my student can't quite place into Math 1050, that potentially I could, this diagram shows they go from 1030 and then a bubble. Are they still interested in pursuing a STEM field? Okay, then go ahead and take a placement test and place into 1050 or something. So they can see that this isn't the end, but it could be just a stepping stone for their student to get in there. And then maybe that could potentially help appease parents if they don't place in, but they could also see that there's value in that 1030 sort of a pathway, but just somehow showing that 1030 doesn't necessarily mean that you've terminated all possibilities that you're ever going to be able to pursue a STEM field. Just a thought. Okay, any other questions that you have before we wrap it up here? All right, well, thank you, everyone. And I really appreciate the feedback, the questions you've thrown out there. It's gave at least me some ideas, and it sounds like Sid some ideas of things that we can reconsider to try to help so that you all don't feel some of the pressure that you get sometimes from parents and students, and try to help strengthen these math pathways out there and get the students really what's going to be the most beneficial to them, and help them to understand that that's the most beneficial pathway for them. So thanks again, everybody. This has been recorded. It'll be posted on our website soon. I want to thank everyone and have a great day.